views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff and management of WWDB-TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to the inaugural episode of Las Vegas Law Talk. I am Alexis Brown. I'm an attorney and your host, but I kind of do this show as the lawyer nerd. And the reason for that is, being a lawyer, you can't really say everything you want to say, guys. So I kind of came up with this alter ego so that I could do a show and have a good time. How about that? Sound good?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Awesome. So these are two peer counselors. This is Moy Valdez and Kelso Smith. And Trial by Peers is really an integral part of what this program is going to be about going forward. Las Vegas Law Talk is designed in part to support the programs of the Clark County Law Foundation, including Trial by Peers. Now, Trial by Peers, it's a really cool program. It's a diversionary youth court where we are taking cases that have been in the juvenile justice system. We take them out of the juvenile justice system. We've trained guys like Kelso and Moy here about how to be lawyers, basically. We teach them over the course of a summer about argument, about opening and closing statements, about evidence, about witness examinations, about all of the things that you need to do to be a lawyer, a peer counselor in the Trial by Peers court. And then we have them do jury duties, and then we give them mentors, and we set them out on their way. So it's a really fun program. Now tell me, Moy, you've done at least one case?
Yeah, I've done one case, and I say it's definitely a changing experience from just doing like regular jury duties, which I know a lot of volunteers do start off with jury duties, and it was really a fun experience. It's nerve-wracking, but then you get up there and it's a fun experience.
Yeah. Well, what about you, Kelso? How was your first court experience?
I felt like it was definitely fun, and it was a good learning experience to help me learn more about law and prosecution and if I would want to be a lawyer.
Do you think you want to be a lawyer?
I think so, maybe.
What about you, Moy?
Yeah, I think I'd want to go into that like area of
Criminal
study.
defense, do you think?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good like study that I would like to pursue when I'm older.
Nice. So we are training our peer counselors. They're learning all about public speaking. They're learning about not just the law, it really is about public speaking, dealing with clients, everything that you need really to be a lawyer, and giving them firsthand experience. I know for me, I was actually a peer counselor when I was 13, and that ability to help someone who is my own age was life-changing for me. You know what I mean? I was a shy kid, and I really didn't, I was nervous, so nervous to be there in front of a real judge and with real attorneys and a real case at stake. But it stuck with me to be able to help a teen, someone my own age. And so now as an attorney, I've really come back around. Now I sit on the board of the foundation. I help the peer counselors as a senior attorney on their cases. And now we have this show, this platform, Las Vegas Law Talk, to invite attorneys, invite judges, invite political figures and candidates to come on the show. And we've got our peer counselors who are going to help out and do some interviews here and there and help us with questions and make sure that this show is something that hopefully our peer counselors and their friends and all of you are going to want to watch. So I'm so excited to finally be doing this. It's been a dream of mine for probably 4 or 5 years now, and I've been appearing on other people's internet television shows and doing interviews with them. So it's a little different for me to be the leader rather than the interviewee or the follower, but I'm super excited about it, and I'm excited to bring things about Las Vegas and the legal issues in our community and the many judges that are running, the candidates that are out there, so that you and the community can stay informed, so our kids can stay informed and entertained about Las Vegas law. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to a video here so that you guys can see a little bit more about the Clark County Law Foundation and Trial by Peers and exactly what it is that the Las Vegas Law Talk Show is really promoting by having guests on and having advertisers, so you know what we're doing. As soon as we're done with that, we'll come on back with Amber Fuhriman, our first guest. She's a lawyer. She loves concerts, and she's a boot scootin' boogie kind of gal, and she's a podcaster on More Than Corporate Podcasts. I'm really excited to have her on. Thank you guys for being here this morning and helping out with the show. I'm so excited. Are you guys excited to have it going on?
Oh, yeah,
I'm so excited. Thank you guys so much. We'll be right back.
We could talk a little bit about the Trial by Peers program. It's been about 22 years with the Clark County Law Foundation, and the goal is to provide community service and educational opportunities to our youth. When I was teaching a summer class, preparing for the examination, and one of the parents came up to me and said it was like listening to a civics class, and that's exactly what it's about. It's about teaching good citizenship, and the whole Trial by Peers is exactly what it means. It's a trial by the peers. It's where the youth are defended by their peers, they are prosecuted by their peers, and they are judged by their peers. It's a juvenile diversion program. Youth that get citations come to the program instead of going to the court, to the juvenile court. And what happens, the thing is based on a positive peer, saying that the youth respond more to other peers, telling them it's inappropriate or hold them accountable. So it's based on the youth court and positive peer pressure. So that's the whole goal of the program.
Of my entire life, hands down, and you have to really take it for what it is and really appreciate it, because we're really lucky to have that in our city.
Opportunity to study law and know the handles around the courtroom. You know, I wasn't really good at speaking at first, but thanks to them, they helped me out. Yeah, so, and to the new peer counselors, I want to say, you got to take this seriously, because this is a program you cannot sit back on, lay back, and pretend like it's nothing. This program will help you succeed, and it will make you a better person, okay? Thank you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Las Vegas Law Talk. I am your host, Alexis Brown, also known as the Lawyer Nerd. So back after that video about the Clark County Law Foundation. It's such a wonderful program, and I really hope that you join me in supporting it. And today's guest is Amber Fuhriman. She has volunteered as a senior attorney for the Trial by Peers program. She's an attorney in town. She does criminal law. She does immigration law. She is a more than corporate podcaster, and she loves hiking and tough muttering and doing all kinds of things and like boot scooting at concerts. So I love her very much. She was actually my inspiration for really finally getting started being on doing her more than corporate podcasting. It was a real inspiration for me to finally get off of my butt and start this show. So welcome, Amber Fuhriman. Thank you so much for being here, Amber.
Oh, thank you so much. And you're too nice. You talk me up a little more than I should be, I think.
No, I don't think that's true. It really, honestly, I do have to thank you for being an inspiration for really finally starting this. I've been thinking about it for so long, and seeing you out there doing your podcast and being so vulnerable has been a huge, huge inspiration. So thank you for being here.
Oh, no, thank you. It's nice to know that it impacts people. So that's
my
amazing.
hope. That's my hope. Thank you.
Awesome.
So I had our peer counselors help out with some questions and some ideas for what we might talk about. So I think we'll probably kind of go over what does it look like to be a lawyer a little bit? What does success mean to you? And then kind of how do we keep it all balanced? So let's talk about lawyer life.
Lawyer life. Sometimes I feel like that's an oxymoron, but So here's what I'll start off by saying. I really love your Trial by Peers program, and the reason that I love it so much is so many people get into this field without knowing what they're getting their hands into. And I love that people get an opportunity to experience what it's like to actually be representing somebody and the struggles that come along with the emotional challenges of sometimes being stuck, especially in the immigration field, with being stuck with what the law is. And I know in the criminal defense field and even in the prosecution field, we end up in situations where we're challenged between what we think should happen and what the law requires us to do.
What is justice, right?
Right.
What does justice look like? What does it feel like? And sometimes as a lawyer, it doesn't always feel like what it maybe should look like, right?
Right, and you never get an opportunity to experience that because law school is so unemotional. And even when you're doing, I went to Thomas M. Cooley in Michigan, and it's a very hands-on law school. So there were a lot of requirements for us to argue in front of judges, and I had a ton of court time by the time I actually graduated, and I still had no idea what the emotional side was because these weren't people. They were we would do mock trials, like obviously you're familiar with made up scenarios or like Saved by the Bell or Twilight or things to that effect. And you don't emotionally connect with that the same way that you do when you have an individual in your office that is about to lose something extremely important to them, either their freedom or the ability to stay with their family, and you have to figure out a way to put your emotions aside to do the best job that you can for them.
Well, the stakes are so high, right? I think that's the difference you're talking about. So in law school, when you're doing mock trials and things like that, the stakes are not very high, but when you have a client that's with you, you're, like you said, life or liberty or freedom or property or whatever it may be, we're dealing with those heavy subjects for people, right?
100%. And in law school, you're just kind of hoping that you pass. So you're like, whatever I need to say and do to get out of this damn class.
Right.
And then, you get to
And sometimes
practicing.
as a lawyer, we're also like, I just hope that we win.
Yes. I think we all have that, right?
Yeah.
We all have that want to win streak. But I think what I love, and I'm going to give a shout out to our legal community here for just a minute, because
sure.
I have friends that are everywhere in the country that practice law, and we are really lucky to have the legal community that we have here, especially with the public defender's office and the district attorney's office. And for the most part, we all work together so well to try to get the best results that we can.
Sure.
And so I think that that's a huge shout out to our community to be able to put that I want to win aside to try to find the best result for
Sure,
people.
and so that's great to hear. Obviously the defense attorneys and prosecutors are coming together. I wish it was a little bit more like that in the civil world. You don't really do a lot of civil work, do you?
No, and I don't do family work, and judges can tell.
The civil world can be a little bit more adverse, and obviously criminal is adverse work. You're a state and a defendant, and so you're adverse to each other, but the cooperation seems to be a little bit better in the criminal world. At least that's from my outside perspective, that when I dip my toe there versus the civil world. What do you think about that?
So I want to tread lightly because I love all of my attorney friends that are in the civil world. I think that it's easier for egos to get involved in the civil world because the stakes aren't always as high as they are in the criminal world. You're talking about money, you're talking about property,
Yeah.
you're talking about things to that effect. You're not talking about a person's life and their ability to be free or their ability to stay in the United States. And so I think sometimes, and this is just my outward opinion because I don't practice that kind of law, but I think that sometimes it's easy to fall back into that unemotional state where it's not really people involved, and that we kind of got to get back on track with that.
And I guess that's maybe as a solo, maybe I have a little bit of a different perspective as a civil attorney just because I am representing people. So I do try to make it about that personality. But large civil cases, it's a big corporation, right? It's a big company. It's an MGM. It's a, Bank of America. It's a whatever. So it is just you're dealing with a representative and that's it. So it is less emotional. It's interesting to think of it that way. When it's hard, when it's real hard, what do you do to get out of that? Like, how do you soldier on sometimes? Because you know how there are days when it is just soul crushing at times.
Well, shutting my door and crying isn't off the table.
Never. Or in the car, or in the bathroom, or wherever, right?
Right. I mean, so anybody who knows who I am knows a little bit about my story. And you mentioned my podcast, More Than Corporate. And my podcast really comes from this because I couldn't figure that out for a long time. And I would carry every case with me. And there was a ton of other personal stuff that is irrelevant for this, but if you guys are interested, go check out my podcast.
That's More Than Corporate, by the way, the podcast.
Thank you. But, we talk about balance, and I know we'll get into that a little bit. I don't like that word, but we talk about what balance is, and I'll explain why I don't like it here in just a minute. But realistically, I crashed in 2016 and had full-on anxiety attacks and panic attacks, and it's because I was carrying everything with me, and I had these perfectionist standards. And realistically, it's just realizing that you're doing the best that you can with the circumstances that you're given, and that you can't always win every case and you can't always save every person, and being able to find whatever works for you to be at peace with that. Right. And it's trial and error because there's no perfect answer.
There really isn't. I mean, and thank you for sharing that. I also had a breakdown not long after I passed the bar, and so like you, I mean, trying to figure out what does this mean? How does it work? And what is the future of being a lawyer look like, and how do I keep it in my life because I love it so much? But then also, how do I make sure that I'm not taking on all that extra stuff, because we deal with secondary traumas, right? What we're dealing with is secondary trauma because a person who is at risk of being evicted from this country or is at risk for spending years and years or even any time in jail, it's traumatic for them, right? It's an experience that they have all of this emotion, and so as lawyers we have to keep a boundary a little bit, wouldn't you say, in order to make sure that we're okay so that we can still help?
100%. And I didn't do that for the longest time. And that boundary has to exist. And I would say the other thing is I went from one end of the spectrum to the other, where I was super emotional and super involved in every case. And then I went to trivializing my own concerns and my own problems and really beating myself up over that, because if my clients are going through this, then what is my problem? What does that really mean? And then you don't give yourself the self-care that you need because you're too busy trying to convince yourself that your problems are irrelevant, and that just adds to your issues.
Well, I can imagine that it would. I mean, yeah, and that's fair, right? I mean, obviously, again, what you're dealing with, you're like, this person is having the worst time of their life. Why am I so upset? But all of our feelings are valid, right? Even as attorneys, I think we do get forced, or maybe not forced, but we are maybe expected to turn off, right? We have to turn off and be the machine and be the monster or whatever, but we're still human beings, right? And so what are you doing to take care of yourself now as a human being, to make sure that you as a human being are good and you can be a good lawyer?
Well, first I want to say that when I started really dealing with stuff in 2016 and started going to therapy and things like that, it was really hard for me to speak out in the legal community, and I shielded that I was in therapy for about a year. And then I kind of got to the point where I felt like I needed to start sharing my story, and the moment that I did, I was amazed at the amount of people in the legal community that came out and said, we deal with those things too. And I was just shocked at why we're not talking about that more. And not necessarily on a mass basis, but we all feel so alone when we go through that. And I was shocked at how many people were like, oh, I deal with that too. And we've just taken it as normal. And that's interesting to me that we're in a profession where your emotions are not always welcomed, and then it's hard to turn your emotions on during the day and turn them off at night, or vice versa. And you've got to find a way to make that happen. So for me, what I'm doing right now to take care of myself, I mentioned that I don't like balance, the word balance.
Yes,
and the
why
reason
not?
I don't
Why
like
not?
it is because for me, and I think any attorney would relate because we have the scales, right? So when I think of balance, I think of life on one side and work on the other, and you're trying to balance that. But each one of those has so many things that go into it that you can't really figure out what you really want to work on because you're putting life in one bucket and work in the other. So if anybody's not familiar with the life wheel, that's what I use now to find this like well-rounded life. And it looks like a Trivial Pursuit piece, and each little square or triangle has a different area of your life, like relationships, work, spirituality, whatever you want to name them. And you rate them from 0 to 10, 0 being the inner spoke, 10 being the outer will. And you connect the dots and you get to see your life and how well-rounded it actually is. And you can see where you really want to work on things. Because so many times, and as attorneys we know this too well, people leave jobs, they leave relationships, they file lawsuits, they blame other people, thinking that that's what's really wrong. And the real problem is something completely different that they don't even recognize. And
Internal, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that life wheel really helps me out a ton. And I do one of those every 90 days.
Oh, nice.
And I look at what part of my life I feel like could be improved. And then I set goals in that area and really set boundaries between myself and work and making sure that I take my self-care time, because I've been on the other side of when I didn't, and it's not worth going back.
It's no fun to be on that breakdown train, trust me.
No, it's fun on the other side, but
once you do all the work to recover, right? I love that idea though of sort of not just life, not just work, but really sort of a whole person approach is kind of what it's more about. Like not just my job, not just who I am as a human being, but all of it, to make sure that all of it is in good proportion, so that way I am doing the best job in my career, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that it was described to me, and I'm a semi-visual person. I won't say I'm a very visual person, but as far as learning is concerned, I'm a very visual learner. And so for me, the more emotion and visual idea I can put behind something, the more it really sticks. And so when I was working with a coach and she talked about this life wheel for the first time, she was like, I want you to take this life wheel and then imagine that what you have is 4 of them and you're in a car and you're driving and this is the wheel that you're driving on and that's your life. And every time you hit this like jagged spot, you're hitting a pothole.
Right.
So imagine driving on a flat tire with a pothole every 30 feet and how successful or how far in your life do you actually get?
You're gonna limp
Yeah,
along
like-
if you're running on,
So,
sort of.
and that's where this comes from all the time, I think so many people are like, this is what my life looks like. And that's why, because you're rolling around on this wheel of life and it's so uneven.
I love that analogy. That's really great. I don't know who that life coach is, but tell her thanks, right?
Oh, she gets it from me all the time. She hears thank you more than I think she wants.
No, and honestly, I mean, thank you for, you have people who are helping you. You mean a therapist, a life coach, you know what I mean? So I think, is that another part of it, having a good community just around you personally to make sure that you're able to keep yourself, I know you don't like the word balance, but we'll say balance.
Yeah, no,
you
balance,
know?
yeah.
I mean, is it important to you to have, how many, what do you think is most important about that group that helps you?
So your tribe is definitely really important, and I have many of them.
Yeah.
And so getting yourself out there and being able to have people that will support you, and more importantly, have people that will call you out on the things that you need to be called out on, because it is so easy for us to lie to ourselves and for us to convince ourselves that we're doing everything that we need to be doing.
What?
I know,
No,
right?
what?
And so it's really nice to have somebody there, and friends and family love you, and they're not always the best people to call you out and say,
Well, they have their own self-interest
yeah,
sometimes,
like they
you
don't
know?
want to hurt you.
Yeah.
So when you can get a tribe of people around there that are willing to be brutally honest and lovingly. One of my friends that's in this tribe calls it the slap and tickle. So, I'm going to tell you how awful it is, and then we're going to work through this together as friends.
Right.
But when you have those people that you can rely on that are also pushing themselves out of their comfort zone, and then realistically just getting yourself in different scenarios. I went to a lot of events last year. I met a lot of people that are doing things that I didn't really realize was possible. This is where the podcast came from.
Yeah.
And we only operate within the perspective of what we know in the world. We only are able to understand things that we have experienced. And so when somebody's talking to us about something, that's why it's so hard for us to really relate unless we've been in that situation. And the more people you can get yourself around that can expand your perception of what's possible in the world, the more you can expand what you're able to do with your life.
Absolutely. That's so good. So now you've been practicing, you've been through so much. I mean, if you could talk to some of this, of course, is about our peer counselors. If you could talk to your younger self a little bit, and what would you say to your younger self about how it is now, and what you wish, what would you maybe have done different, if anything?
So the biggest thing that I would have done different, and this is why the podcast is called what it's called, is really embrace authenticity at a young age.
Okay.
Be willing to acknowledge who you are and what you want and what impact you want to make on the world, and leave society's expectations behind. And that's hard to do as an adult, and it's even harder to do as a kid.
Yeah.
But part of my breakdown in 2016 was waking up in this life I didn't recognize and not understanding how I got there. And there was a lot of trauma along the way that led to that. But there was also a lot of, I never really took time to figure out why I wanted to do this. And I never had an answer for people when they would ask me why I wanted to go to law school.
Okay.
It was just, I feel like law school is one of those things that people who feel like they need an education end up in because it's easier than medical school and there's perceived less research but there's really not less research.
Right.
So I feel like there are a lot of people that end up in law school not knowing what they're getting into.
By default.
By default.
Yeah.
And so that's the biggest thing is like, be willing to have those difficult conversations with yourself and with the people around you about who you really are and what you really want to accomplish, and be willing to constantly check that and make sure. And probably the most important thing is give yourself permission to change. Like, don't commit to something so much that you don't give yourself an out. If I wanted to walk away from the legal field right now, 2 years ago, that would have caused so much panic, and even the thought of it and the conversation of it, because my entire identity was tied to being an attorney. So give yourself permission to change, and what you decide to do right now is not what you do for the rest of your life. It doesn't have to be.
And I think that's, you said that, being a lawyer is such an identity. I think that's, hugely true. This is my friend Alexis. She's a lawyer. You know what I mean? I don't know if you get that.
All the time.
But I'm also all these other things, right? I'm also I like to hike. I like to be creative. I like to do those kinds of things. How to and I agree that being able to break some of that down earlier is probably better, and having your own identity of whatever it is, not outside of being a lawyer, is probably really important. You think so too?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to realize that at a early age before you get into law school, because I don't know about you, but when I graduated from law school and I started dating in the post-law school world, and people would ask me what I liked to do in my spare time, I'm like, I don't know.
Well, when you're a new lawyer, you really don't have spare time, right?
Right. Like, my life for the last, 3 years of law school, but it took me 9 years to get my undergrad. So my life for the last, 13 years has been nothing but school. Yeah. And I don't know what I am without like a book in front of me.
Right.
And so that's why I really encourage people to make sure that you're constantly giving yourself self-care, even in that school, because it's so easy to fall into just chasing a goal and chasing a dream and forget to have balance. And
destination
then,
addiction.
Yeah.
That's, and I think some of us who get into the legal field maybe have a little bit of just propensity for that in general. We're a little bit neurotic.
Always.
Some of us have trauma. We want to go into the law to help people. There's a reason for it.
Yes.
And so we kind of end up in, I know for me anyways, I think I felt, I had this nagging feeling in me that once I was a lawyer, everything was going to be better. Like,
yes.
It was going to be like all of the things that I had already been through. Like, it was, now I'm a lawyer, now we're good. Like, if that's the goal, we're done. But that isn't it. That's just the beginning.
No, and that,
Right?
like, if I could take what you just said and, like, package it in a little bow, that is what led to all of my concerns. Because I had this end point where all of my problems were going to disappear, and I hit it, and I was outwardly successful to everybody around me, and I felt so empty and so unhappy. And I had everything that I had said I needed or wanted in order to have all my problems disappear, and they were all still there. And I'm like, this is bullcrap.
How did they follow me here? This was supposed to be
Yes.
the bookend of all of those things.
Like
And-
yesterday, I understand my problems, but today, not so much. They were supposed to go like Harry Potter style.
It's, and I have a feeling that a lot of lawyers maybe feel this way, and we don't really talk about it. We don't talk about the transition. Now they do the transitioning into practice, which is a joke, a little bit. I mean, it's a well-intentioned program, but
Yes.
it's not as effective, I think, as it could be. And maybe some of that should be just dealing with the transition in general.
Well, I think the bar's trying
They are,
because
100%.
we have increased the mental health requirements
Yes,
for
yes,
CLEs.
yes.
We've increased the substance abuse requirements for CLEs. Like, we're starting to have these conversations, and this just isn't in the legal field. This is human emotion and human nature. So anybody, I mean, you don't become an attorney without being some sort of an achiever in some way, right? You have goals, you go reach them, like, that's just the way life is. And anybody who has that type of a personality is always looking for that next thing to accomplish and always looking for that next thing to do. And that leads to, mental health issues and substance abuse issues and a feeling of never feeling like you're enough and things to that effect. So
Perfectionism that's required
Yeah.
of lawyers, all of that.
so I have to credit the bar for trying. But I will say that our CLE programs in general are kind of a joke because you can they try, they do the best they can. There's no perfect solution.
Yeah.
You get into it what you put out of it,
Yeah.
is I guess what I'm trying to say. And it's so easy to accomplish your CLE requirements and not actually accomplish anything because they can't obviously require that every CLE is done in person or else attorneys wouldn't get it done. We're too busy.
Right.
But when you don't do it in person, you get into it what you want to put out of it, and sometimes you're just not ready.
And when all you're hearing is an hour-long video in the background while you're working, which is how a lot of lawyers do their CLEs, you know what I mean? Especially if it's a video, then yeah, you're not getting anything out of it. And unfortunately, I think some of the mental health CLEs, especially, they're scare tactic a little bit. They just talk about how bad it is, and yes, it's bad. Unfortunately, the statistics for lawyers are super high in suicidal ideations. We're super high in suicidal completion. We're super high in substance abuse and mental health issues because of all of those issues. And if we were able to talk more about it, to talk more just from the early on in law school, maybe we could help other lawyers, maybe they don't have to go through breakdowns like we did in order to get back to reality and real life, and being a human being.
I mean, I think the sad reality of it is that we can talk about it all we want to, but until somebody's ready to hear it, it's not going to make a difference. But we should never underestimate the value of planting a seed, right? Yes. So we need to be having those conversations because when they're ready to hear them, something's going to click and they're going to remember everything that's been said to them before. But so many times the breakdown is necessary. Maybe not on the level that I was at, hyperventilating in a corner for 4 days and refusing to eat. But that emotional understanding of where you're going, because outside of that, you can't relate to it. So people can tell you that this is what it's going to be like, and you're like, okay, you're exaggerating. And I mean, it's not.
I had people warn me. They said, don't be a lawyer. Don't. Other lawyers are like, why are you becoming a lawyer? And I'm like, well, because this is what I've always wanted to do. And of course, I had that goal point in mind that apparently, I didn't realize it until after that was the goal point. But, now we're like, I think I have told people, maybe you don't want to be a lawyer, which I feel bad about because I used to be that person where I'm like, don't tell me that. No, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to be fine.
You should never feel bad for telling somebody that they might not want to be a lawyer. I tell people they need to have a clear reason for why they want to.
Yeah.
I actually had an undergrad professor of mine that I loved so much that refused to write a law school recommendation letter for me because he told me he doesn't write law school recommendation letters because he doesn't help people ruin their life. And I'm like, okay.
Well.
Sounds good. He says you're going to hate it. He says you're not, it's not what you think it's going to be. And I
first
can't.
he was probably right.
And he was. And honestly, it took a lot of time, and this is the work I've done over the past 4 years, of figuring out where the law fits in my life and being able to go out and do other things. And I'm not shy to say I almost closed my practice.
Yeah.
And then because you go from one spectrum and you're okay, I'm leaving this behind because I can't go through this anymore. And then I do love helping people, and I get like called for, you know, immigration and criminal stuff, and I love being able to provide insight to people based upon my knowledge and experience and education, and I don't want to leave that behind. So how do I allow myself to be in that position and then still allow myself to speak and allow myself to talk about the mental health issues and allow myself to run my podcast and then still allow myself to live my life? And so that's really what it comes down to, is giving yourself permission to have multiple identities, and or multiple parts to your identity, and not putting yourself in one bucket.
Kind of back to that wheel situation where the lawyer bit is a part, but it's just not the whole thing.
Yeah, and for a long time it was everything.
I think for a lot of lawyers, for most of their careers, it ends up being everything.
Yeah, I agree.
You know,
I was at a speaking event in November, and this was one of the most impactful events that I've ever been to. And one of the speakers says, I really wish that people would stop focusing on the career that they have and focus on the life that they want to have, and then figure out which career path gets them there. Because so many times nobody really says, I want to be a lawyer because they want to be a lawyer. There's another reason behind it. I want to help people, or I want the status behind it, or, you know, whatever it is for them. And if you were to figure out what that underlying reason is that you want to go to law school, you could figure out whether there are other ways to fulfill those desires. And maybe law school is the right way for you. And maybe being an attorney is your lifelong dream, and you want to be that attorney that's 70 and still in the courthouse and respected and practicing law. I know that's not me.
Right.
And so I know that I want to get what I can out of this and help as many people as I possibly can while I'm doing it, but also have an exit plan.
Yeah. Did you, I mean, you thought that was you probably at one point, or did you?
Oh, no, 100%. I thought that's all I ever wanted to do.
Yeah. And then reality kind of struck you.
Yeah, it did.
The reality of the whole thing struck you.
Well, and I think it comes from experiences, right? Because I wanted to be this high-profile criminal defense attorney that was in jury trials all the time, and you don't know that that's not what you want to do until you do it.
Right.
And you're like, this is not what, I mean, this ain't Perry Mason. So, like,
I think that's what we're breaking down here, is the myth that being a lawyer is anything like TV at all.
Right?
It looks so glamorous and fun, and, you know, and it is, though. I mean, it is.
Oh, I love my job. Like, I know we've talked a lot about the negative parts of this.
It's so fun sometimes. I mean, being in court is a thrill.
It is 100%,
You know?
and waiting for a decision from a judge, and then finding out that you won on a legal argument, especially when you have somebody on the other side that's so convinced that you're wrong.
Right. Yeah, they're right.
So
you're wrong. Yeah.
I mean, that part is amazing, and I love it, and I love what I do.
Yeah.
And you have to have some sort of that passion to be able to stay in this field and be successful.
Yeah.
When I was in law school, I remember professors saying, you know, these are all the things that you could do with a law degree and not practice law. And I'm like, this is a ridiculous conversation. Like, why would anybody go to law school and not practice law?
Right.
And I wish that I had listened to that a little bit more, because now I'm learning all the things that I can do with a law degree that don't require necessarily courtroom, and ways that I might be able to take my law firm virtually, and ways that I might be able to work on everything that I want to do. I mean, there's a solution to every problem. You just have to get out of your own way to see it.
Yeah.
And that's where the tribe and my coaches, and, you know, I have a speaking coach, I have a business coach, I have multiple tribes, I have my podcasting coach. Like, I have people around me that have particular purposes in my life to make sure that I can accomplish the things I want to accomplish.
That's cool. So now that you're on the other side of doing all of this work, and you're still working, of course, and I'm sure we'll continue to work. I mean, what does success look like to you now? I mean, it was like, let's retire a lawyer in the courtroom, and what is it now?
Yeah, so interestingly, I don't think that I ever had a definition of success, because I will say that my first about 6 months in therapy, I kept telling my therapist I don't feel successful. And she asked me, what does success mean to you? And I'm like, honestly, that's the first time anybody's ever asked me that question. And I've never had to think about it. And so for the last 3 years, I've really spent some time defining what that means to me. And at this point in time, success to me is being able to go to sleep at night knowing that every choice that I made was authentic to who I am, that I impacted somebody's life in a positive way, and that I didn't sacrifice my identity or my goals or my future to do it, and that I'm leaving some sort of a legacy that will live on longer than I do. And I'm making a positive impact, and that's success to me.
So I love it. And so how are you, other than being, of course, criminal immigration attorney and doing the podcast, are there other things you're trying to do in order to kind of leave that lasting impact?
Yeah, so I'm actually working on building a business and life coaching business.
Nice.
Called Success Development Solutions. And it's going to focus on individuals that are in situations like ourselves that have had a problem defining success and feel like they are doing everything that they're supposed to be doing, and yet they just don't have all the answers, and working them through some of the things that I worked through in order to get to the other side. And I'll say other side and qualify that by the fact that you're never actually there, right? There's always another side to the other side that we're on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a constant journey, and I think that's one of the things that is not drilled home enough in public education in a pre-graduate situation, is that there is no end game to this. There's no end destination where everything just falls into place. And so I want to really work with people that are in that situation. So I'm doing that. I really am kind of meticulous about calendaring in my downtime, because if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't happen, and I will work myself to death.
Live and die by the calendar.
Yes. So my poor calendar, I think I've got about 25 of them in different colors, and it looks like some like Picasso awful painting, but it keeps me somewhat organized.
So you really put in your personal time, like I'm going to go and do yoga, or I'm going to go to a concert, or, I mean, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily, I mean, I do have a concert calendar. I share it with a couple of my friends, and we all add different things to it, and so I do have a concert calendar. But for me, I'll just block out time where it's me time, and whatever that me time ends up being, like, I don't want to say I'm going to go I go to the gym every morning, so I'm not going to use that. But I'm not going to say I'm going to go hiking at this time, or I'm going to do this, because I don't know what I'm going to feel like doing.
Yeah.
But it's my time where I started shutting off my phone, which I used to have panic attacks if I didn't have my phone around me. Okay. And so I shut off my phone. I completely disconnect.
Yeah.
And then honestly, I talk about this a little bit on my podcast as well, but creating a morning routine was amazing for me. I never understood the true value of starting every day with intentional steps, instead of, because I was that person that I wake up and I got to be in court at 7:30 in the morning, and I'm just hoping I make it there on time. And so to set a time that I have to get up and spend some time meditating in the morning, or whatever works for you, reading in the morning, going to the gym, whatever it is, but make those first 2 or 3 things that you do in the morning completely intentional decisions, and then the rest of your day falls into place. Yeah. If you're reacting the moment that you wake up in the morning, your entire day is reactive. And I know every lawyer out there will understand when I say that you get home and you're exhausted and you felt so busy and you accomplished nothing.
Yeah.
And that's why those days happen. So
it's a little bit of, we have to slow down, right? I think sometimes being a lawyer, even, just a human being, I think now, I mean, everything moves so fast, right? Everything moves so fast. And as lawyers, we're expected to try to keep up with that pace. So if you don't slow down a little bit in the beginning of the day, maybe to do something for yourself, then you are going to be reactive all day, and that makes you less effective.
It does, 100%. I mean, there are studies out there that say that we only get 4 to 5 hours of productive work in a day. And so, and this was really hard for me when I opened my law firm, because I wanted to be that person that was productive constantly. And I had to learn that sometimes if I work for a couple hours and then take some time to myself and then come back and work, like, there's nothing that says I have to be in my law firm from 8 a.m. to 5. Like, nobody's telling me that anymore.
Right.
And I can be more productive if maybe I'm working from 6 to 10 at night instead, and giving myself the freedom and understanding myself enough to know where I'm the most productive. So it's just being able to give yourself, again, that freedom to listen to when you're the most productive, and be able to, one of the biggest things I think is we have this like 24/7 culture right now, and clients want our text message, clients want emails with immediate responses, and I 100% respect weekends and when I leave. So unless it's another attorney that's messaging me, or unless it's a client that has a true emergency, I'm out. Mm-hmm. Everything that you have can wait until I go back. And I felt for a long time like I was going to lose business by doing that. And I mean, if I do, then at least I keep my sanity.
Well, right, and I think some of that, you mentioned culture, and I was thinking that word as you were talking, and some of that I think is just lawyer culture in general, right? The lawyer culture is you need to be in the office for X number of hours, you need to be seen at the firm, you need to be available and those kinds of things. Do you think that moving from a firm to your own practice has really helped you find that balance finally? And do you think you could ever go back to a firm because you might lose that?
I would never go. I can't go back to a firm
because of this.
Yeah,
do you think?
I mean, I could do like some off-council work, I think, but I don't think that I could ever be required to be somewhere that I don't dictate myself ever again.
So being a solopreneur is the best, isn't it?
It is. But I will say, and this is one of my driving factors right now, is defining your life and defining what words mean to you. Because when I opened my firm, I was like, I'm so excited that nobody's going to tell me where to go or what to do. Well, nobody includes me. And so I sat there going, well, what do I do? And then you feel like you have to tell somebody you're leaving your office. And I'm like, who do I tell?
Nobody.
Like, who do I talk to?
Now I say, you know what, I have the best boss. She doesn't get mad if I come in late. Or
I know, right?
I have the best boss.
Yeah. No, I definitely could not go back to a firm.
Yeah.
I was very close to leaving the practice of law before I opened my own firm because that life is not for me.
That culture.
So
Yeah.
this gives me the opportunity to explore some other options. And I have networked with some attorneys in other states over the last little bit that have taken their law firm completely virtual. And then they travel. And I mean, obviously they don't do litigation because that's semi-impossible.
Right.
But there is a way to find your balance and do a partial virtual law office and do, be here, organize your court appearances, things like that. And so those are things that you can't do when you have a boss and a partner and
employees and this and the whole
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, and I would love to do like maybe some government work and things to that effect, but I know that I'll never go down that road because it sacrifices all of this other stuff that I love so much.
Because you have to go back at 7. If you're a public defender, you got to be there at like 6 in the morning, and you got to stay until 6 at night. And
I really value my freedom. It's become one of my happiest things. Like if I'm somewhere, it's because I've agreed to be there, and I've chosen to be there. And even if I'm there because somebody told me to be there, I chose to accept that. I chose to take that client. Like everything in my life is completely my choice at this point in time. And and I can't go back to not having that.
To be able to dictate your future. I mean, you are literally designing your own future. I think that's maybe the difference, right?
100%.
Before you were like, this is the future, right? The end goal was the future, and now you're really designing it actually moving forward rather than just expecting something at that goalpost, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, people that are working in firms, they can still dictate their own future and define what that means.
We're not knocking firm life. We're trying not to knock firm life. This is just the benefits of solo practice.
Yes. I mean, there are some downfalls to solo practitioner too. We could get into all those.
We could have a whole nother hour.
No, you're never a victim to your circumstances. So anybody can dictate their own life. The freedom that you have to be able to really take that to the next level, though, is limited when you have a boss and when you have a firm and when you have people that are relying on you to bill certain amounts of hours and things to that effect. So if your goal is to be a lifetime attorney, maybe a firm's not the wrong choice for you. If you're really got that entrepreneurial spirit, then I don't know a true entrepreneur that lasts in a law firm.
We usually hang our shingles.
Yes.
Is what we do, and then we end up doing other things.
Yeah, like this.
Yes, like more than corporate podcasting, right?
Yes.
Amber, I mean, it's been so much fun. We're about to wrap up, but it's been so amazing having you, and I really appreciate all of your insight, and thank you for being really vulnerable about your journey, because I think that if we're able to do that more, we're going to help more lawyers just grow through the process and still maybe stick with it or not and be better human beings in the process, right?
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And when you say stick with it or not, know that either one of those are okay.
Right. This isn't the end all be all. Being a lawyer is so amazing, but we can change if we want to. We don't have to stick with it any longer than we have to. Why don't you tell people, how do we get a hold of you? What's your website, your law firm website, your podcast? How do we get a hold of you?
Awesome. So my law firm website is Fuhriman Law. That's Fuhriman Law. Oh, sorry. My law firm website is Fuhriman Law. Fuhriman Law. My podcast, I'm sorry, my podcast is More Than Corporate. So that can be found anywhere you listen to podcasts. I also have a website, morethancorporate.com. And if you want to come in and hang out with Alexa and me and some crazy other individuals, I have a Facebook community called More Than Corporate Community, where we just build each other up and support each other and talk about everything that we've talked about here on a bigger scale with more people. So that's how you can track me down. The best place, again, for my law firm, whether you're looking for immigration work, criminal work, consulting work, anything to that effect, is my Fuhriman Law website.
Nice, thank you so much. And I love the More Than Corporate podcast group on Facebook because we share motivational stuff. We can, I talked about doing this program on there, and it was just the support in that group is so amazing. So thank you for putting that together for us.
You're welcome. And I will just note that it's a closed community, and it's that way for a reason, because everybody that's in there is willing to get very vulnerable.
Right.
And I wanted them to feel like they could do that without judgment of the entire interweb.
Or anybody else. All right, Las Vegas Law Talk viewers, this has been our show today. I am so excited that we're wrapping up our first episode. We had our peer counselors here. We're supporting the Law Foundation. We will be recording every second and fourth Saturday of the month. If you're interested in coming on the show, if you want to be part of it, you can go to lawtalk.vegas. You can give me a call, 702-848-8806. You can, of course, find me on Facebook as well, Las Vegas Law Talk there. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to our peer counselors for being here. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, John, in the studio, to our WWDBTV studio for allowing us to be here. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys next time.